Hello, and welcome to this special edition of Ozarks News Journal. Today we will look at sports culture in America.
We're joined by a panel of experts for a discussion on the positives and negatives of sports in our society. Ozarks News Journal starts right now. Hello and welcome to this special roundtable edition of Ozarks News Journal. Sports in America go hand in hand. Cheering for our local, regional, and national teams is as much part of American history as just about anything else. And at its best, athletics brings communities together, offers a sense of unity, and helps thousands of America's youth learn teamwork, discipline, and even helps them get an education.
There are negative sides as well. Sports has become major corporate business in America, a multi-billion-dollar industry that has shown at times the ability to cause controversy on nearly every level. Today we are discussing sports culture in America, and along with our panel, we will take an in-depth look at how sports and athletes themselves are treated in our society.
We are joined today by a panel of our experts today. We have Art Haynes here. He is a radio host at 98.7 FM, The Jock. He's also the voice of the Missouri State Bears, and he's also a broadcaster for the Chiefs Radio Network. Art, thanks for being with us
My
today.
pleasure, thank you.
And next we have Dr. Laureen Stone. She's a sociology professor at Missouri State University. Her focus is adolescent self-esteem and delinquency. Dr. Stone, thanks for being with us.
You're very welcome.
And last but not least, we have Teddy Simniak, who is a former basketball player at Drury University and was on the national championship team last year. Teddy, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Our first topic we're going to tackle today is we're going to take a look at how athletes are treated in society.
We took to our local communities this week to talk to people about sports in America and what they think of how our society responds to them. Let's take a look.
I mean, sports are a huge thing in our society right now. I believe that they are put on a pedestal because of that. So people like Albert Pujols or Ray Lewis or David Ortiz, people like those, I feel like they're really looked at as heroes other than like people who like serve our country.
I think that happens in any situation where you meet people who are powerful or people who are famous, I mean, I think things tend to get overlooked a little bit, or they tend to bend rules and say, okay, well, just this one time, we'll let it slide, because of who you are.
But I think a lot of people do because, especially little kids wanting to grow up and be like them. So I think they should put out a good example, which I know some athletes don't do that.
So like what they do and like the type of money they make, I think they could just pay their way out of everything. And like most athletes, they don't get punished like regular people in society. Like most of them, they like pay their way out of like jail time and stuff like that. So yeah, they're a bit reckless sometimes.
Professionals, players, everything and so forth get paid probably too much for what they do, when there are people out there who do other types of work that barely get anything, can barely scrape by. So I think there's a little bit of disparity in the income and the payment that they receive.
Now, the attitude seems to be that athletes in this country are given extra privileges and given extra benefits that other citizens don't necessarily get. Art, we'll start with you. What is your take on, what is your reaction to the SOTs, and what is your take on this topic?
Well, I think it works both ways. I think, sure, athletes get the adulation that goes with a lot of people watching and cheering for their performance, but they're also under a microscope. So, for example, Dwayne Bowe of the Chiefs this week had a speeding ticket and turned out there was marijuana in the car. That happens with just an average person. It's not even on the news or a blip on the radar, but you're held to a higher standard, and people think that they get away with more because of their status. And in the final analysis, that might be true, but there are consequences that go with the territory of being a professional or college athlete that the average person doesn't have.
The NFL has had 28 players arrested since the Super Bowl last year. How do you feel this brand is for the Super Bowl? I mean, they're continuing to let these guys play, and what do you feel about this? If 28 guys have been arrested, what does this kind of portray the NFL as, Dr. Stone? What do you think?
It doesn't look good for the league by any means, but at the same time, I think as athletes, as sports heroes, we hold them up to a very high standard. We put them on a pedestal. We let them have exceptions, but we do that with a lot of other occupational groups in this society as well. And when you recognize that sport is a microcosm of society, the same processes and structures that go on in society are found in sport. I don't think it should surprise us that there are professional athletes that make poor judgments. There are a lot of people in society that make poor judgments. It's just how we treat them when it's discovered that I think that people react to very negatively.
And Teddy, you played athletics collegiately. What is your take on this topic?
I mean, being put in a position where everyone's watching you, you have to hold yourself to a higher standard because people are always watching you. They're always looking up to you, especially kids. I mean, you got to make sure you handle yourself properly, and then when you do get in trouble, you have to be willing to accept the consequences for your actions. Just because I know just personally a situation, I won't say who or where, but I know players got pulled over and got caught with marijuana at a college I know very well, and they got suspended for practice for 3 days, and they played in the next game. I mean, that's not right. But I mean, some situations, players do get punished, and a lot of others, unfortunately, they're let go. So.
While you were at Drury, Teddy, you guys had protocol on the road. Do you feel like, curfew times? Did most of your teammates follow these, and do you feel like most college athletes do follow them, or do you feel like there's a few wild gooses / wild cannons, I guess?
I mean, it really depends on the coaching and the culture that you have as a team. It starts with your leaders, and some people, a lot of winning programs, they will have that culture of doing the right thing. And last year, I believe my family, my brother's team, we held ourselves accountable to what we did in our actions, and it obviously paid off in the end. So,
Dr. Stone, do you think we as the media and just as society, do we endorse this kind of behavior for athletes?
I don't think we endorse it by any means, but we do pay a lot of attention to it. And it's because we glamorize sports, we glamorize athletes, we make them superheroes, we call them role models, when that probably is the wrong label to put on most athletes.
We talk about, Johnny Football, all the spotlight he gets for getting kicked out of a party and all this attention he gets. Do you feel like, it's not worthy news almost? Some of these sporting stories, we should be focusing on real topics at hand instead of just, these type of stories that people talk about athletes.
Seems tabloid even.
Well, I agree. We have now a 24/7 news cycle, internet, sports talk radio, ESPN. They've got to have something to talk about, something to fill that time. And a lot of it is repetitive, but they just jump like raw meat on things like this. I really don't care about Johnny Manziel's off-the-field, off-season activities. But on the other hand, he's got to be more aware of the situation that
he's in.
He just doesn't seem to care. He's saying, hey, I'm a college kid, I'm going to have fun, I don't care what the consequences are. And it's a poor reflection on himself and on his university. However, if he delivers the goods on Saturday afternoon, it's going to be overlooked, and he's going to be drafted high in the NFL because he's a good player.
Teddy, do you think, on the topic of Johnny Manziel, do you think he acts this way because he is a superstar versus, just a typical offensive lineman or something like that?
I don't know. I can only say for him personally, but a lot of the time, you'll say a lot of athletes get this attitude of entitlement, that they're entitled to have this, they're entitled to do this. I've talked to Wayne Simeon before, and he had back a long time ago when he was in college, well, not that long ago, but he had people doing his homework and stuff like that. But he said it wasn't right. But they just, people are willing to help you. You're just more prone to get away with stuff. So,
Art, what do you think is the best thing about sports in America, just generally?
Well, I think the way it pulls people together, it also puts up barriers, though, too. If you've got a Cards Royals or Mizzou, Kansas, things like that, people really can carry that too far to the point where, they don't like the people at all. They could be wonderful people, they probably are, but, if you're wearing blue or you're wearing black and gold, I don't like you because you're not part of my tribe. So that's the negative. But the positive of it is, when you've got, like in Kansas City, just virtually everybody pulls around the Chiefs. that can really create, it's an economic impact for one thing, but a sense of pride within a community. Now, that's driven by wins and losses a lot of the time. You still have pride, you're still all together, all for one, but you got a lot more pride when you win.
Well, and sports is one of America's favorite pastimes, and most Americans are involved in sport either as a participant or a spectator. So it's something that they share in common, and like Art says, it unites us.
What's your favorite thing about sports?
I love the fact to where I learned a very hard work ethic. Basketball is the hardest thing I've ever done in college in my life, and it has taught me to work hard, to compete, and to always strive for better, and have a goal to always push yourself.
Okay, thank you for your opinion on this topic. Coming up next on Ozarks News Journal, we'll take a look at the ongoing debate over paying student athletes. Good idea or not?
Don't go away. This special edition of Ozarks News Journal will be right back. Welcome back. College athletics was once a way for students to get an education, many of whom had no chance of attending college without an athletic scholarship.
Major college sports has now turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry, with universities using sports revenues to fund larger portions of their operations.
Is it fair to continue to offer athletes, and only some athletes, a basic athletic scholarship while helping their schools earn millions of dollars? We hit the street to see what the public thinks, and let's take a look.
I do not think they should be paid for what they do. I mean, it's their choice to play a college sport, and if they want to do that, then they can do that themselves. And I mean, they already get a bunch of free stuff. I have a buddy who plays on a college team now, and he gets a bunch of free gear, so no, I don't think they should get paid.
Me as a student, I bring, $8,000 a year to Missouri State, and Kyle Weems as a student probably bought $30,000 to $40,000 to $50,000 a year just in tickets and prices and advertising.
Not necessarily, because most of the college athletes, they're getting paid, their schooling is getting paid for. So I think that's already, I think they're already getting paid in the process.
I think they need to be getting something. I don't know that paid is the way, because then it becomes unequal with colleges that could just pay more and then they're just pros. But I think in bigger schools with bigger programs, they definitely bring a lot back into the school, and so something should be worked out.
They are getting paid by being able to go to college on a scholarship. That is their payment at this season of their life.
Teddy, what's your first response to this? Do you think Division I athletes should be getting paid?
You know what? They go to school with a scholarship. I see that as their payment, and for me personally, not necessarily the player getting paid, because I feel like that would make attitudes and entitlement even higher. But I feel like instead of just making the school money, because they make millions of dollars for school, but give that back to the students in some way. I mean, not just the players, because they're getting their scholarships. I mean, they're getting money to play. For me personally, I came from a very low income family, and it would have been nice to have a little extra money, because even with a full ride, I still was struggling, and my parents really couldn't help me out a whole lot.
Basketball is your job.
Yeah.
You don't have any free time.
It is my job, and I don't have a free time to get another job. So in a way, it would be nice to have something a little extra, maybe a couple $1,000s even for a year. But I mean, where does it end?
Dr. Stone, is this fair? What is your take on this?
I think college athletes at big Division I schools that are in revenue-producing sports should be paid some additional stipend beyond a scholarship. The scholarship has a value and it pays for their education, but at the same time, the time demands that are placed on college athletes, it's their job. And they can't refuse to not go to practice or to not watch game films. And so I think we need to recognize that, especially in those big-time programs, they're bringing in dollars for programs that are making money off of the efforts of the athletes.
And what about particularly low-income athletes that don't get much money otherwise?
Well, unfortunately, they don't have parents that can always give them extra spending money, and that may be a contributing factor on why some of them use bad judgment and get into trouble breaking laws.
I just say it's a slippery slope, because Dr. Stone was saying, and this would make sense, the revenue sharing, a revenue producing sport should be the athletes that get paid. Legally, I don't think that's going to fly. I mean, I think that's going to run afoul of Title IX. If you're going to pay the male athletes in football and basketball, you have to pay the women's soccer team and the women's swimmers, and so you have to pay all or none, and that's where it really kind of gets tricky.
It is very tricky, and it's kind of a murky area because these schools, conferences, television, it generates so much, media advertising generates so much money. The fact that the student athletes are the ones who put their bodies on the line, they risk injury, that could jeopardize their hopes of making money at all in the future.
And their scholarships are annually renewable. Exactly. I mean, they can be fired, essentially. You can say, well, you don't really fit into our plans. We'll help you get a scholarship at another school or a walk-on opportunity. So they really are at risk. A lot of people think it's automatically a 4-year scholarship. In most places it works out that way, but the percentage of transfers is very high and growing higher. I mean, I think of incoming freshmen into Division I basketball, it's something like 45% of them transfer before their 4 years are up.
Graduate students get paid stipend. Why do you feel like athletes aren't? They're doing a job too. Do you feel like this isn't fair that grad students do and players aren't?
Well, it becomes an arms race then. I mean, like I think one of the people suggested on the Man on the Street that okay, Texas says I'll give you 5,000, and Oklahoma says I'll give you 6, and then hey, here's 7. And
it's a bidding war.
Yeah, so that's exactly what it becomes, and you might just go to the highest bidder, and then you've got an unequal revenue situation there.
I think it also comes down to that fuzzy line between amateur and professional, and we like to think of college athletes as amateurs. And basically at the big time Division I, especially football programs, that's not true. Yeah. And so if we pay them a stipend, then in a sense it's admitting that they're taking on more professional elements.
Should athletes be able to make money off of their own name, essentially? College athletes, that is. For signing memorabilia or other functions like that.
I mean, that's a tough subject. I mean, more people are going to have more opportunity to make money. It's amazing probably how many athletes do, and you'd never hear about it because they never get caught. I mean, having rules on that is, I guess, okay, but I mean, paying them and stuff like that, where does it end with allowing stuff?
That's just it. I mean, that's the reason these rules are in place. I used to be in the Dallas market when the old Southwest Conference was around, and there were 8 schools all in the same state in the same conference. And those alums would bump into each other in social settings, and it just really created a witch's brew where, I want my school to beat your school so I can brag about it when we are in the golf locker room on Sunday afternoon. And so the incentive then, say a college athlete is going to sell his memorabilia, well, a booster school X might say, I'll give you $50,000 for that in order to play and boost my team and boost the way I feel about my alma mater. So that's why these rules are in place, is to try to keep schools from having unfair advantages based on their boosters that might be willing to throw their money around.
And I think they're trying to avoid exploiting the student athlete any more than they already are.
Okay, that's all the time we have for this segment. Thank you guys for your insight. Coming up on Ozarks News Journal, we explore the elements of locker room culture.
And we'll also take a look at the role parents play in helping to shape our young athletes and how it affects performance in school. The pressures, the priorities, and the responsibilities. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. In this segment, we want to take a look at the competitive atmosphere and locker room culture in sports.
We went out to find out what the community thinks about this topic in light of the Jonathan Martin, Rich Incognito, and the bullying issue with the Miami Dolphins. Let's take a look.
If you're playing, you guys are in the locker room every day, you guys play as a team every day, so after a while, it's going to become like a brotherhood. So I think Richie was just trying to reach out to him and, show him that brotherly love, but he was kind of playing with him at the same time, so he probably took offense to it. Martin probably took offense to it, but he probably took it the wrong way.
This probably opened up a lot of people's eyes. It's probably so much more behind closed doors that goes on with professional sports that we don't even know about. So maybe this was a step to helping that, to somebody else speaking up about, bullying. And maybe this story helped another child somewhere that we don't know about.
I just think he's being a big baby about it. You're getting paid millions of dollars to play a sport. Someone doesn't have something to say, and there's so much testosterone in locker rooms like that. People are just going to get mad and upset, and you got to be able to just shrug things off.
Guys, this is a very nuanced topic, and I think there's still a lot that we don't know about this particular story. Dr. Stone, what is your take on this story?
Well, I can say I've never been in a male's locker room to know how much trash talking goes on. I suspect it's a lot more than goes on in a female locker room. I don't think you would see this happening in females' locker rooms. But I think a typical reaction to this, especially among football players, I think people are surprised that a male who, like the person on the street said, is full of testosterone. Why he didn't just take a punch at him? I think calling it bullying, I think, is getting kind of a negative reaction from people in general, because we just think that males should be able to handle those kind of affairs on their own.
Art Haynes, what is your take?
Well, Jonathan Martin, as it turns out, is from a privileged background. Both of his parents are Harvard grads. He went to Stanford. Richie Incognito is a guy that's been kicked out of 2 colleges and run off of 2 pro teams. So, I think we're talking about 2 very different types of individuals. Incognito, I think, sensed weakness, physical weakness, and maybe there's some kind of geek type of factor working there with Martin because of his background. But nonetheless, I would think this is counterproductive to the team's betterment. Now, there have been stories come out subsequently that Incognito may have been encouraged by the coaches to toughen Jonathan Martin up and get him to attend more of the off-season activities, but that is, based on his background, that was the wrong person to ask to toughen somebody up.
Teddy, is there a chain of command in the locker room? When you were a freshman, were you listening to the captains, I'm doing what they tell me to no matter what?
Yeah, you always have everything rolls downhill from the coaches to the team captains to the other players. Best player to the worst player. I feel like this Incognito case has been a little blown out of proportion. In junior college, I've been in a locker room where we've had a fight before. It's not rare to have, I wouldn't say bullying, but it's just competition. You want to make each other better, but there's also a right way to go about things, and Incognito obviously didn't do it exactly the right way, but still, stuff like that kind of happens a lot. You're constantly pushing each other to do better, and with guys in the locker room, you're always making fun of each other, saying, hey, you can't do this. We're guys. I feel like this is just blown a little bit out of proportion.
Dr. Stone, you say we don't see this with female athletes as much. Why is that? Is it true that female athletes don't engage in conflict as much in this way as males do, or what is your?
Well, I think it goes back to traditional gender roles. I think, especially in team sports, female athletes, while there's a degree of competition between them, I think there's also a kind of a sisterhood that develops in that team, and so. I just don't think that fighting and arguing and name calling is as likely within the team. It's more maybe between teams, but not so much on the team because they're bonding together as a unit.
Yeah, and to add to that, especially on a team, you think everyone knows everything about each other, and you think that somebody else would have heard something what Incognito was saying, and that speaks for their locker room. Nobody else said, hey, you shouldn't do that. Obviously the culture isn't good there.
But there's kind of a corollary. Kids get bullied in school, and you wonder why they don't go to teachers or something or principals to report it. So I think it's a very similar phenomenon.
I think this ties in with parenting and how parents can help raise athletes, not just not just focusing on athletics, but developing a well-rounded child and eventually human being. Art Haynes, what is your take on that?
Yeah, that's kind of one of my favorite topics because sometimes you have parents that will raise kids up to be athletes, and they'll sometimes just create a monster by at a very young age. Travel teams, at 8 years old, and putting kids on a pedestal, and that it's all about winning, even at the age of 8.
At all costs.
Yeah, I mean, that is why we keep score, is whether you win or lose. But it becomes, I think, more critical whether you win or lose the older you get. I think some hyper-competitive parents, and this point's been made by a lot of people, but are trying to live out their own failed athletic careers through their kids. And if they're not careful, they'll burn their kids out, and they'll create a whole bad sense of values for them. There's a good way to do that, but sometimes we see some of the worst examples.
Dr. Stone, what would you say is the healthiest way to raise a student athlete as a parent?
Well, I think the best way to raise a healthy student athlete is the same way to raise a healthy child in any ways. They need to be taught how to show respect and how to remain civil and how to handle conflict. Parents have to serve as those positive role models, and unfortunately, if you've ever been to youth sports programs, you many times see adults acting very badly, so they themselves are not being very good role models and giving positive messages to their children.
Teddy, how did your family come about raising you as a player and student, I guess, now that you're done?
Yeah, I was lucky to have the parents I did. I mean, in my house, God was first, always first, and then came family, then schoolwork, and then sports. I mean, they were very sacrificial. They sacrificed a lot for us to be able to play sports. Coming from a small private Christian school, we had to buy our own gear. We had to pay for travel to games and stuff like that. So, I mean, coming from a more humble background, I guess you'd say, and they always kept God first, and it always kept me in check. They always kept me in check, would never let me get a big head, me or my twin, or my older brother for example. But, I mean, I won't say, you just got to make sure you do the right thing and don't put sports before other things, because it's a game.
Okay, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Haynes, you, Dr. Stone, and Teddy for being with us today. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
You can also see this show in its entirety on our website, myozarksnewsjournal.com.
Be sure to join us back here next week for more of the stories that matter most to our region.
Thank you, and have a great day, Missouri.